I've been a little negative lately, so here's 3 things I'm very excited about for the upcoming Minnesota Vikings season. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Today on the show, I want to get a little excited. I want to get a little hype going. All right, it's July. And that is the hypiest of hype months. We're through the dead of June. We're into the dead of July. There's a few weeks before training camp starts in earnest. We're going to get people out there, more than just media and the sort of lid that they will keep on things that they see. There's going to be eyeballs on the team on J.J. McCarthy for the first time since he got hurt. And so it's time to get unabashedly excited. This is the moment where I say homer out. Go nuts. Everybody should. Every team is going to win 10 games and have an outside shot at the division at least. Everybody's got a wild card and a chance. Everybody's draft picks are going to do what they need to do. Everybody's new free agents are going to get there, and every investment was made correctly. It's just how it goes this time of year, and I think that that is beautiful. So here are 3 things that I am very excited about this year. If you have been checked out for the earlier parts of the offseason, we can recap a little bit of this. But the first thing that I'm very, very excited about is J.J. McCarthy, man. How can you not be? The Vikings spent this whole offseason basically parrying away off-ramps, exit ramps from J.J. McCarthy. If what he had shown them in his first year, both before and after the injury, were at all concerning, they would have pulled the trigger on some of these fairly easy ideas. Now, that's not what the Vikings wanted. They didn't want an off-ramp. They wanted somebody that could complement J.J. McCarthy, that could be helpful to him in QB meeting rooms and stuff, and be a mentor to him, somebody who's been in the league a couple of years. They ended up on Sam Howell, maybe a little younger than I think that they were shooting for, but maybe that's just me projecting my own ideas onto the Vikings. But they end up with Sam Howell as the backup, and Sam Howell is not a serious challenger for the job. They had every opportunity to bring back Sam Darnold. They had every opportunity to grab Aaron Rodgers. They had Joe Flacco calling them. Not to mention Daniel Jones could have competed with him for the job. And Daniel Jones was basically told that it wouldn't be a competition, and he went to Indianapolis, where he gets to be a part of that competition, and now Anthony Richardson might be hurt, and he might get to win that competition and start by default, so it works out great for him. By the way, that matters to the Vikings for comp pick reasons, so you should root for Daniel Jones to start as many games as possible. I forget how many he needs. But with all that said, J.J. McCarthy is not guaranteed to be awesome. The Vikings have thrown their lot in with him. Even though there were, moments through the offseason where the reporting made it seem like they were super sketched out, they were super 50-50 on him, and they were thinking about other options. Ultimately, they said no to all of those options. And now after the fact, it's coming out that they were never really seriously thinking about any of those options. They were telling Daniel Jones, you're not going to start. They were telling Sam Darnold, we're not going to pay you a serious contract at all because our guys McCarthy will bring you back for another 1-year thing. And now it's coming out that they were never really seriously considering Aaron Rodgers. They just took a few days to get him the answer to that question. So they're in on McCarthy, and I'm excited about that. Not necessarily because I think it's a surefire hit. How can you ever think that about a quarterback that you haven't seen play in a real NFL game? It's even one preseason game. You can't, if you're coming to any conclusions about J.J. McCarthy already, you're selling snake oil. But that doesn't mean you can't get excited about the possible future of the franchise, the sort of Joe Burrow Cincinnati Bengals parallels that many before me have pointed out and many will continue to, right? A highly drafted quarterback of a sort of similar play style of kind of zipping these tight windows, wanting to go for spacing and finding the right razor thin margins. He gets hurt his first year, but then his second year, they make an actual Super Bowl run, and they've been a contender ever since. That is, I think, the hope of what the Vikings think that they are creating, what the Vikings want to be creating. And what's nice about this year is that doesn't have to be the expectation, right? You don't have to say, well, they better go win the Super Bowl or, win the NFC or else this didn't work out. That's probably an insane thing. I don't know. Somebody will probably say it because that's just how this world works. But in the event that the Vikings do have ups and downs, and maybe JJ McCarthy has a bad game here or there, right? Or maybe he's takes a little bit. Maybe they start slow and then over the course of the season, he gets a little bit more used to the pace of things and he gets a little better. Even if they end up, 9-8 and out of the playoffs, or even 7-10 and out of the playoffs, if JJ McCarthy shows us enough where we can still feel good about him as the future of the franchise, with the understanding that there is still probably improvement to come. He's very young. And so whatever version of him we see this year shouldn't really be taken as the final product here. This is somebody who's going to learn and grow over many years. Who he is in 2029 is going to be different than who he is now pretty substantially. That's how it goes with quarterbacks. They're completely finished and realized ideas in their first or second year. Probably shouldn't have to tell you that, but I want that foundation laid for later when I'm asked that question of, so is JJ McCarthy a bust in, the second half of, the third quarter of the week 1 game when they're down 10-17. The point is a mediocre season this year can still come with the right hope. And that means I'm not walking into this year needing the impossible to be satisfied, which is so relieving. Most of the time that I have had this show, that I've been host of Locked On Vikings, I've been covering Kirk Cousins up until last year, right? I joined in 2018. So the whole thing has been a Kirk Cousins season. And every single time you felt like you were walking in saying, well, if he does something he's never done before, we'll be happy, but otherwise we probably won't be. And you kind of had to deal with that. You kind of all I was able to say was, well, you never know. And variance on that take of hey, the game starts 0-0 and it's not over till it's over. But you had all of this evidence that, okay, well, if he can, for the first time in his whole career, put down 16 games without laying an egg in a huge spot or several eggs over the course of the season, then, we've got a Super Bowl contender. And you had to talk yourself into that. And then last year, there was no hope at all. Last year, if you remember, the expectations were super low. The Vikings had the third worst Super Bowl odds in the league. They were supposed to kind of bottom out in a bad Sam Darnold year and, get a really high draft pick. And especially after JJ McCarthy got hurt, and they were supposed to kind of basically take a year out of the national consciousness and nobody we're going to be okay. Sam Darnold ends up playing better than anybody thought. They end up killing it and great stuff. But the vibes this time of year last year were super different than they are now. And now, last year, a 6-win season, you would have been yeah, that's understandable. Now, it's still an 8 or 9 win season, but the quarterback looks good. And you're going to go, okay, they're headed the right direction. That's okay. But that doesn't mean that that's the ceiling. That's, I think, just what I need to be satisfied. And that makes me really, really excited because it's about how is JJ McCarthy? Not necessarily for me this year about if they win or lose a lot of games. That's not the way that the Vikings are approaching this. This is very much a Super Bowl window season for them. And I think they just need to prove that they are capable of contending. But if they end up, dropping the division on tiebreakers to the Lions and going into the wild card game and, not necessarily making a deep playoff run, I'm fine with that. As long as they showed what they need to show for me to believe that functionally running it back in 2026, which if you look at the resources available to them, it's going to be their plan. And if you look at the contract durations, not a lot of people leaving, not a lot of people changing out. 2026 and 2025 should roughly be the same roster. So I just need proof of concept now. And that relies on JJ McCarthy, which means I get to watch JJ McCarthy every week, analyze him every week, and be able to come to my own conclusion about whether or not I'm satisfied with how the Vikings played. And it doesn't have to be married to the result of that game. If they got super unlucky and lost on a missed field goal or something like that, or they got the bad bounce on a fumble or something, some bad ref call happened and everybody's mad, but JJ McCarthy played well in that game, I get to be satisfied with it. I'm super stoked on that. That's really exciting. Not to mention, I'm just excited about J.J. McCarthy as a quarterback for reasons I've spoken about ad nauseum on this show. But I liked him coming out of the draft out of Michigan. When he became a Viking, I was excited about that, and that hasn't changed. I'm ready to see the kid play and to move on to the next chapter of the Minnesota Vikings. It rules. I'm ready, but it's not the only thing that I am excited about this year specifically. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you think J.J. McCarthy is going to kill it, why don't you go lay down a futures bet at FanDuel? I believe 35.50 is the line. Last time I took it, I looked at it. Over under 35.50. You can also gamble on J.J. McCarthy having a 4,000 or even 4,500 yard season if you want something a little more aggressive, and you can parlay that with the Vikings win total or to make the playoffs or any other number of things. Same game parlays over in baseball games if you're doing that stuff, golf, soccer. There's all kinds of stuff to look through at FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Moving right along here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. The next thing that I want to talk about is probably not going to get as much attention once the season actually starts, because when the season actually starts, all eyes will be on J.J. McCarthy, and all the other press is going to go to the bona fide superstars like T.J. Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, Jonathan Grenard, Harrison Smith, Josh Metellus, I think, is hitting that range for the Vikings. At least in the local world, right? And make no mistake, I am just as excited as anyone to watch Justin Jefferson for another 17 games. Like, we are just blessed. We get another season, at least 17, barring injury, of Justin Jefferson. Hooray. Like, that's just fun. And with Addison and Hawkinson, I adore that trio. That trio really, really rules. I like bristle anytime anyone suggests like trading one of them away or somehow breaking up that trio. I think it's just an awesome thing to have for a quarterback. And if you're going to try to give one away, I need to hear your plan for how to replace that. I think there should just always be a trio on a healthy offense. You need a trio. One of those guys can be the tight end. One of those guys can be the running back if you got like a Saquon situation, but I need a trio of like healthy, good, pass catchers. And the Vikings have that, and that's super exciting. But for me, the thing that I'm really excited about, and maybe I just want to geek out on it, is the O-line. Well, again, I started covering the Vikings in a semi-serious capacity in 2016. Remember that year on the O-line? That was the TJ Clemmings, Jake Long, catastrophe Andre Smith year. That was the first thing. Actually, one of the first articles I wrote, you can maybe find it. It was on purpleptsd.com. The title was something like Vikings offensive line, right pieces, right places. I have no shame in this. Okay. This was almost 10 years ago. I've grown a lot, but I was so wrong, man. I was so excited about that offensive line. I was excited about the 2016 offensive line. It's the wrongest thing I've ever been about. I was really frustrated that they had moved a lot of players around and it had not worked. Like Brandon Fusco had just kind of flamed out for this reason. And I thought that they were kind of overly tinkering with things. So I thought it was good that everyone's playing at their natural position. That was literally the only point I could like conjure in my baby little football mind. I don't think that those are still hosted. So if you can find it, I'd actually be kind of happy about it. But, either way, that was like where I started, right? And the O-line thing has not been better since that. It's gone through the Riley Reif and Mike Remmers eras and up through Dakota Dozier and Drew Samia and these sort of like disastrous guard experiments that haven't worked. But over time, right? The year I started on Locked On Vikings, Brian O'Neill was a rookie. That he joined there. They got Garrett Bradbury, who they've now upgraded on for Ryan Kelly. But that stabilized that position for 6 years. Obviously Christian Darrisaw is huge. And now they've added 2 free agents that I absolutely love. Super excited about those. And if you missed it, go check out my reviews of those. There's a podcast episode about Ryan Kelly and Will Fries. And then there's a Patreon episode, which I believe is free to watch now. If not, yell at me because it should be. about both of those guys, about Ryan Kelly, but it's mostly about Will Fries, and how excited I am about Will Fries, how good he looked before he broke his leg. Sure, there's a risk that he doesn't come back from his leg right, or that Ryan Kelly gets re-injured, but like, screw that. I'm excited. It's going to be fun to watch those guys. And I haven't even talked yet about the first round pick, Donovan Jackson, who I had as the number one interior offensive lineman in the class. Full disclosure, I did not watch comprehensively every single guard in the class, but I did watch everybody that like reasonably that, everybody else had number one if they didn't have Donovan Jackson, like Gray Zabel or Tyler Booker. And I had Donovan Jackson above those guys. And I was really excited to get Donovan Jackson and to see the other two guys go off the board first. You can go to the live show. I breathed a sigh of relief when Gray Zabel went to the Seattle Seahawks and not to the Minnesota Vikings. We'll see how that ages. But I'm excited about Donovan Jackson. I just think he's good at the position, and that, like, bar none. I just think he's good at the position, and especially in pass protection and keeping that really important young quarterback upright. They have everything around McCarthy that they need. And the two kind of things that I'm excited about sort of combine into another one, which is JJ McCarthy just doesn't need to be that good for the Vikings to succeed. He doesn't need to be a top 5 quarterback. I think a top 20 quarterback can put up top 10 numbers in this offense. And I don't think I'm really saying anything controversial there, because that has happened a couple times. Kirk Cousins put up career best numbers. Josh Dobbs put up career best numbers in a couple of games, right? At least in per game numbers. Sam Darnold put up career best numbers. You just put up career best numbers here, and part of that is Kevin O'Connell and the like mystical magic that he has about quarterbacks. But it's also being able to throw to Justin Jefferson and having the outlet of TJ Hawkinson and being able to bomb one deep to Addison, and that's pretty good. Naylor is part of this, even though people are angry that he had a little dropsy thing. He's still pretty firmly wide receiver 3. And it's just a good offense. And plus, it's just a high volume offense. So you get a lot of raw passing yards. And sometimes people mistake that for you being good. But hey, if you're betting on FanDuel, that doesn't matter. They still count. So McCarthy can have his blemishes, but as long as he's not so bad that he's sandbagging everybody else, all he needs to do is dish this stuff out to guys that know what they're doing. And so I'm super excited that we not only have prioritized an O-line to give him time to be slow if he's a rookie and he's slow, or a second-year player, I should say, and he's slow, but also to give him enough surrounding talent where that, like, he just doesn't have to do everything himself. He gets the easy mode version of this job to start, and that's a great way to get your feet wet. So to be considered a success, I genuinely think top 20 quarterback, and you're probably having a successful season. It's a tough schedule, so I don't know what a successful season looks like to you or what your expectations are going to be. I don't need to beat the Eagles. I don't need to beat the Bengals. I do need to beat the Bears. I would love to give those two good teams a run for their money, but I'm not going to walk into those games picking the Vikings. They're not going to be favored in those games, and I think that that's appropriate. Those teams have proven more. And it, like I said at the outset, it's not going to be about that for me. And I'm very glad that we have this nice kind of gradual acclimation year almost for JJ McCarthy, where the Vikings can still be successful, be in the playoff hunt, and have a real season worth respecting, while not immediately needing the quarterback to do every single thing for the offense. And I hate to do this because I have had this in my head for too long, and I always say it, and I don't want to like pile on the Bears, but that's so the opposite of everything the Bears have done with Caleb Williams, where they drafted him higher, but they really expected him to just sort of carry things immediately. And I don't think that was healthy of them, and I'm very glad that my team isn't doing it. That's a thing to be excited about. I've only talked offense so far. What am I excited about on the defense? That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. I remember back in, I want to say it was like 2018, when in 2017 was that run of Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne to the Washington Will Go With football team. And the sort of trope that I started kind of ascribing to them, which was that, like, man, that really good SEC D tackle that is like should be a blue chip player but falls because everybody's wrong about positional value kind of falls to Washington a lot, huh? It like happened twice in a row and it always got in my head. And then it happened again with Jer'Jon Newton. There was a little injury thing with Jer'Jon Newton, but he was another guy that like going into the draft process, people talked about as like a top 5, top 10 pick until they started doing mock drafts and realizing that there was like other talent that was going to go higher. But like people were really excited about him. And he just kind of ends up falling right into Washington's lap again. And so I was always kind of jealous of that, this whole time that I've been following football a lot more, like in a professional manner rather than just as somebody kind of idly checking Reddit every once in a while. I've always looked over at Washington and thought that's a good D-line. No matter what's going on, they've always had a good D-line because they've always had Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne and, name your edge rusher that comes in and out of there. But having Jonathan Allen as a Viking is so exciting to me. I'm so stoked to see him cook. And sure, you might not get the same Jonathan Allen you had, 3-4 years ago. And I know he's also coming off an injury and there's all these risks of what's going to happen. So one of these guys is going to get hurt again. Like somebody is going to re-aggravate their injury. And then we're going to talk about should they have taken that risk or not, or whatever. You're not going to Yahtzee it. You're not going to win all of these bets. But the point is they made them at volume and they hope that they win enough of them. Right. But like, I don't care. I'm so stoked on it. I've respected Jonathan Allen from afar for years and years and years. And I was jacked just to see that there was a possibility that he would be a Viking, that there was like a rumor that he kind of wanted to play for the Vikings. Look, over the years, we've heard a lot of rumors that so-and-so wants to play for so-and-so team, and it happens sometimes and it doesn't happen sometimes. So, it was guarded. Like, I'm not going to like suddenly sit here and think about Jonathan Allen as a Viking as a given, but then before I knew it, he showed up to the training facility and he didn't leave. He didn't consider any other team. He just wanted to come to Minnesota, which is in and of itself something to be excited about. One of the funniest like refrains that I hear from this is a primarily YouTube comments thing, which means maybe I shouldn't respect it. I'm sorry, YouTube commenters, but you've earned that reputation. But is that like the fact that players want to come to the Vikings, that they get like A's on the NFLPA report card every year means that they're like soft and like, well, the real way to like win a Super Bowl is to like, your players shouldn't want to be there. They should be, you should be tough and gruff. And it's this very like, I walked uphill both ways kind of, 1950s sense of like, I'll just say it. It's a big time like misunderstanding of masculinity. And it's like, it's like actively saving the Vikings money and getting them free agents that nobody else had access to. Like, I'm sorry, if you get a B+ on all those things, you don't get Jonathan Allen. Like, direct correlation. And like, he went up on the podium and was like, yeah, it was because of the report card. Like, he just said it. How cool is that? Can we not just appreciate that? Must we discourse? It's rules that everyone wants to be a Viking and they want to play for the Vikings and they like playing for the Vikings when they're on the Vikings. It's very good. Joe Flacco called the Vikings and was like, hey, do you guys want a backup quarterback? And the Vikings were like, nah, we got our guy. We are the belle of the ball. We're homecoming queen, baby. Like, everyone wants a piece. It's great. Not to mention Aaron Rodgers wanted to be a Viking and like put the whole thing on hold to give the Vikings all the time that they wanted to think about it. And the way I understand that timeline is that the Vikings told him no. And he went, all right, well, okay, Steelers, I'll take your deal, but I'm not going to sign it because I'm not doing minicamp. And that's my headcanon, I guess. It's my theory, not my, like, I didn't hear anything through any grapevines, but that's my theory based on the reporting is of like how the timeline went down because everybody wants to be here and Jonathan Allen wants to be here. Javon Hargrave, he's like a mixed bag for me because I am genuinely concerned about how he's played the run last year, but I also understand that San Francisco had no choice but to put him into a weird position because they had some weird stuff going on at D tackle. So they had to put him at nose and like have him take a bunch of double teams, which he's never really been like, that's never been the game that you want him playing. You want him one-on-oneing all the time. So if he's only in 5-man surfaces, if he's only in, 3-4 under Ragnar fronts, like if it's a 5-man surface, you ain't getting doubled, right? You're splitting up all the doubles. He gets to be one-on-one with someone's 6th round guard and you get a cook. That's great. I still like Harrison Phillips. I know people have sort of soured on him, and I think it's just sort of a little bit of fatigue of just seeing the same guy, right? And yeah, like he wasn't productive in the pass rush. He never is. And the lack of interior pass rush was an issue. So like that's super totally fair. But putting two guys that are sort of aimed at that issue next to Harrison Phillips, holy moly, how you going to run on these boys? It's awesome. You're going to have a penetrator here or there. You're going to have two guys that can absolutely hold a spot, not to mention Pro Bowler on the outside and an up-and-coming player that I am excited about. I went on a whole big, long diatribe about this yesterday on Town Hall Tuesday about Dallas Turner, but I'm stoked on Dallas Turner. Like I said with JJ McCarthy, when it's someone's first year, when they're young, they're growing, you want to see growth. If there's a problem week 1, I'm not going to panic about it. If there's the same problem week 17, then you go, hey, this is something that like should probably be addressed with some sense of urgency. With Dallas Turner, a whole bunch of those things got better. And you don't have to just trust me on this. I showed my work on my Patreon page. They're all free to watch, not to mention all the podcasts that I did with Pete Bursich, with my buddy JJ, who is a D-line coach that has taught me a lot about the position. And he's not a perfect package by any sense of stretch of the imagination. A lot of the problem with Dallas Turner is he doesn't have sand in his pants. And sometimes, him just like power rushing, he won a lot with leverage in college, and that's not enough in the NFL. And that's probably the biggest like existential concern with him. But he's also not going to be asked to be Jared Verse, hand in the dirt, win on the outside every play. He's going to be a lot more like Andrew Van Ginkel is for the Vikings. And when Andrew Van Ginkel is inevitably off of the Vikings, he just signed a contract extension, and that's very exciting too. Gink is awesome. We love Gink, but eventually, time comes for us all, and Dallas Turner will be there to take over that role of, basically being the engine of any weird blitz thing that Brian Flores wants. The vision is super clear to me, and I'm really excited about that front vision. The front 7 is great. I've had my concerns about the secondary. I explained those at length in yesterday's episode and the episode before. But the front 7 I'm super stoked on them. I think it's going to be really hard to run on the Vikings. I think it's really going to be really hard to pass block against the Vikings. And those two can go a long way toward covering up a secondary if it's like a super, super, super extreme. There's a lot to be stoked about on this team. And I think the theme that I keep coming back to is that I'm stoked about the young players, and I'm more stoked to watch and analyze them than I am to like see if the Vikings win. That's the thing that's changed in my brain from doing Locked On Vikings all these years, is that like whether or not the Vikings win or lose has not changed my life very much. I either win and I do a podcast, or they lose and I do a podcast. Like it's kind of neither here nor there. And there's this like inevitability that's almost comforting when they're like really bad. But when there's no young, exciting players, that affects me. That it's like harder to talk about them, right? Like in the last year of Kirk Cousins, it was a lot harder to like bring up another Kirk Cousins episode. Like we've already said everything there is to say about him, but there's exciting young players. There's new additions. There's a lot to be stoked on with the Vikings, and I'm ready for it. Bring them on. I'll see you tomorrow. And as always, Skol.